Hello, and welcome to this introduction to the winter susceptibility testing meetings orientation. And here we're going to talk about the virtual meetings that will be held over the next few weeks. And this is the first meeting of the susceptibility testing meetings for the winter meetings. Okay. Oops. Okay. And so the intent of today's sessions is to introduce all of you newer attendees to CLSI and to these meetings. And the speakers for today, my name is Janet Hindler, and I'm co-chairholder with Dr. Audrey Schutz of the Outreach Working Groups that falls under the Antimicrobial Susceptibility Testing Subcommittee. The other volunteers that are going to be presenting today include Dr. Sean Lockhart and Dr. Brian Loopers, who are chairholders of the antifungal and veterinary agent testing subcommittees, respectively. We want to encourage all of you to ask questions. We want you to make sure you understand how CLSI works and the processes for developing documents. If we don't have time to get to questions at the end of the session, we're going to suggest that you continue to answer the chat, to introduce questions into the chat, and we will answer your questions by email. Okay, so as an overview, today we're going to talk more about the CLSI organization and the structure of that organization, how to navigate the upcoming meetings. We're going to talk to you about details for the various subcommittees, including when they meet, how they develop documents, and how you can get involved with these various subcommittees, whether it be the antibacterial or anti-susceptibility subcommittee, the antifungal, or the veterinary group. Okay, so this is just a little schematic of where all of these subcommittees fall. And the main one that we're going to talk, that Audrey and I are going to talk about, is that for antibacterial testing, where we not only address testing of aerobic bacteria, but we also have documents that describe susceptibility testing of anaerobes, fastidious and uncommon bacteria as well. The antifungal testing subcommittee, as would be expected, they address yeast and molds. The veterinary group looks at antibacterial testing of a variety of organisms and agents that are unique for treating veterinary infections. And another group that we're not going to talk about very much today, there is a committee that addresses susceptibility testing of mycobacteria, nocardia, and other actinomycetes. But if you are interested in these areas, we would encourage you to contact us, and we could put you in contact with individuals that are responsible for those documents developing. Okay, so your first CLSI meeting, this is probably the first meeting for all of you. And again, too, this is the first meeting of the meetings that are going to be held over the next few weeks. So unless you've otherwise been told, you're going to be considered a guest for these meetings. Now, you can become an official volunteer, and Audrey's going to talk more about that later, how you become a volunteer and various categorizations within the working group or subcommittee structure. And here it's important for you to think about this today. And when we're describing the different types of committees and subcommittees and working groups, that it would be important for you to see if there might be one that is a good fit for you with your particular interests. The processes and timelines for the various subcommittees may vary slightly, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Okay, so how are you going to access all the information for these meetings? CLSI has introduced the Whova platform. And this is a meeting software that organizes the meeting materials and also links to the actual presentations. And it syncs with Zoom. And so you could actually access this through your computer, or also you can download an app and access this to your mobile device as well. Okay, and I didn't mention that if you go to the CLSI website, on the very first page, there is a link to the virtual meetings. You can click on that and learn more about the Whova platform, as well as the agenda and the materials, access to the materials for all of the meetings. Okay, so probably all of you have registered for the meeting by now, and you've created your login. We're encouraging you to update your profile, and this is so other volunteers can access you through, since they know they may know you're being involved with the meetings right now. You could view the agenda. You can create your own agenda and add it to your calendar. And this is how you're going to access all of the meeting materials and also access the links to the live presentations. So a little bit about CLSI, the CLSI organization. Okay, so who is CLSI? So CLSI, also known as the Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute, it's a not-for-profit standards development organization, and it brings together a global laboratory community for a common cause, and that is to foster excellence in laboratory medicine. Documents span all areas of laboratory medicine, medical laboratory, clinical laboratory medicine. Today, we're just going to focus on microbiology. There's an abundance of documents that address other areas such as chemistry, hematology. There's a large number of documents in laboratory management that are pertinent to many aspects in laboratory medicine. And most of you are probably a member of the CLSI through your organizational membership. So for example, Dr. Audrey Schutz, she is an employee of the Mayo Clinic, and Mayo Clinic Laboratory is a member, an organization has organizational membership to CLSI. So that's how Audrey can become a volunteer for CLSI. So if your organization is not a member of CLSI, you could also participate through an individual membership. Okay, so a little bit about the structure and the governance structure of CLSI, the CLSI organization. So many of you will probably be starting, and most of us have started by contributing to a working group. And that interfaces with the subcommittees and the document development committees. And there's an expert panel that oversees the various technical aspects of the documents, and they will actually evaluate new proposals for new documents. They will make sure the documents are produced on schedule. And then the Consensus Council oversees the process to make sure that the documents are developed under a fair process, that complies with the consensus process. And all of this is governed by the CLSI Board of Directors. In addition to all of these volunteers, so all of these groups are volunteers, there is the CLSI staff that is readily available to help you and does a tremendous job in making sure that all of our activities become reality. Okay, so what about the history of the CLSI? And the CLSI was formerly known as the NCCLS, or National Committee for Clinical Laboratory Standards. And that has actually been around for over 5 decades. It was originated in 1968. And this is when 31 clinicians from various organizations felt that there was a need to look at how we can improve what laboratories are doing for patient care. And so they developed a formal consensus process for standardization and developing basically what we know as standard of practices today. In 1977, the NCCLS was accredited by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, as a voluntary consensus organization. And then NCCLS also became the home of the National Reference System for Clinical Laboratory, And this is a collection of reference systems intended to improve the comparability of laboratory test results. So there is good reproducibility of performing testing from laboratory to laboratory. Now, in 2005, as a result of the global expansion of use of CLSI documents, the NCCLS documents, I should say, the name was changed to the Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute, or CLSI. And again, this is to embrace the international focus of the organization, that it's not just confined to the United States. Today, CLSI is widely recognized around the world. There are over 1,400 member organizations, over 400 individual members, as well as over 2,000 volunteers contributing to the development of the documents, and currently manages over 250 documents in various disciplines. And CLSI, the process for CLSI is a consensus process, and all of the documents are vetted through this consensus process, and involved are 3 constituencies: the professions, the industry, and government. And there's great transparency is what is done at CLSI. The meeting minutes and much of the material that's presented at the meetings is available for public view on the CLSI website. And if you go to the CLSI website, you can see there's a tremendous amount of information that's posted here. We encourage comments from anybody that's interested in the content in any document that's being produced. And all of you today, hopefully you'll identify some area where you can contribute to CLSI as well. And so the ultimate products of the CLSI processes are developments of standards and guidelines and other materials, such as educational materials that can support these documents and all of these different documents. And again, too, that is what the ultimate goal is, to produce documents that can guide clinical laboratories in their processes in testing and reporting. Okay, so, among the documents, some are labeled as standards and others as guidelines. And a standard is basically a document that should be used precisely as defined in the actual document. So for example, the materials that are suggested in the standard, the steps to perform the test in the standard should be followed precisely. So for example, we have a document for performing the disk diffusion test. So all the steps in that document should be followed precisely. In contrast, we have guidelines. And here, like an example I'll use for one of our guidelines is the M39 guideline, and that describes preparation and use of antibiograms. And here we're saying there are a number of recommendations here, how to prepare your antibiogram, how to use your antibiogram, but this should be followed on a volunteer basis, and you may actually make some alterations to what is actually suggested in this guideline. So again, that's the way that CLSI categorizes the different types of documents. Okay, in terms of the volunteers, as I mentioned, there's representation from industry, government, and the professions. And this is just a listing of the types of organizations that may participate under these different categories. So for example, for industry, we have diagnostic manufacturers, we have the pharmaceutical instrument industry, and the pharmaceutical manufacturers are very important when we're developing our standards for susceptibility testing, particularly in developing breakpoints. We have LIS and HIS vendors, suppliers, and clinical research organizations. In terms of government representation, there's public health agencies, there's regulatory bodies, accrediting organizations, and in the professions, we not only have clinical laboratories, we have research laboratories participating, healthcare delivery systems, educational institutions, professional societies, trade organizations, as well as standard organizations. So as you can see, there's diverse representation and individuals that are contributing into the final products, which are the standards and guidelines. Okay, now I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Schutz, and she's going to talk about the specific antimicrobial susceptibility testing subcommittee. So Audrey, it's yours.
Thank you. All right. So thank you very much. I've been attending CLSI meetings since 2008. And I started then as a guest and then became a reviewer, et cetera, went up working through the different subcommittees, through the different working groups. And so I remember well my early meetings. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Go back. It's a little lag. There we go. Okay, so I will be discussing the AST subcommittee. And the mission of the AST subcommittee, we have a lot of things that we do. Some of those you know very well, such as developing standard reference materials for testing, providing quality control parameters for testing and establishing breakpoints, et cetera. But we also work on a lot of other things involved in that treasure trove of a document of M100, such as providing suggestions for testing and reporting strategies. We are continuously refining and revising and looking at things and trying to improve not only our communication with our clients or the physicians and other healthcare providers who are reading our reports, but also we are also continuously relooking at new breakpoints, et cetera, that we need to revise. So we're constantly working on things, always busy. One of the other things that we do, and Janet and I, Janet mentioned that we co-chair the outreach working group. It's an educational working group, and we're the ones who are putting on this for you. We try to educate our users through a variety of different types of media routes about our standards and our guidelines. And the mission statements are listed in the front of each of the AST documents. So this group has been around for a long time. CLSI itself, or NCCLS, as it was known, was formed in 1968. And then the AST subcommittee started developing documents even in the 1970s. So we have the M2 disk diffusion methods document, as well as our M7 MIC methods document and the anaerobes document as well. And so moving up in the years, the M100 supplement was around the late 1980s and early 1990s that was released, the first one. And then the M39 antibiogram document, the first one of those was in the year 2000. So it's kind of fun to look back to see the first publication of each of these major documents that we've had. And as you know, we're always revising and updating them. So our chairholder and vice chairholder for the AST subcommittees, they of course rotate, and currently our chairholder is Jim Lewis. He's a PharmD, and our vice chairholder is Dr. Weinstein, Mel Weinstein, and he's an MD. So as you can see, we have a variety of different people who volunteer and work in a variety of these positions. So the chairholders' responsibilities and vice chairholders are listed here. They work together. It's really the chairholder who ends up appointing members and advisors, and I'll get into the different roles of the AST subcommittee in a minute, and the differences between members, advisors, etc. Notably, the chairholder and vice chairholder on the votes that come up at the plenary session do not vote except in select situations. Okay, so now we're getting into the variety of different roles. These are the volunteer roles on the subcommittees. Members and advisors are listed here. And the members and advisors, these are appointed positions. They serve 1-year terms that are renewable yearly for up to 4 years. Members must include representatives from each of the 3 constituencies that Janet mentioned. Members serve as authors and subject matter experts and serve on working groups as well. They vote on technical decisions and help draft documents. So they've got a lot of work they do. Advisors also do a lot of work as well. They provide technical expertise to the subcommittee and they serve on working groups also. They provide their input and their experience on draft documents that are submitted for approval. Reviewers. So this is another role that's under the advisor role. Reviewers can serve on working groups and or provide technical input on issues and documents. They comment on draft documents. So any of you who do have an interest in our subcommittee's goals can become a reviewer. You can make suggestions, submit data, etc. And if you're interested as a reviewer, you can join working groups. You can identify an ad hoc working group. We'll get into what those are versus a standing working group. You can even identify a standing working group that you're interested in. But if that's the case, you should discuss it with those working group chairs first, and then simply submit a request to CLSI by emailing at this email address here. So to become a volunteer member, advisor, or reviewer and be added to the official roster, you do need to submit a disclosure of interests and a CV. So in addition, if your membership is not already covered by your organization's membership or an organization's membership, then there is an additional administrative fee that's required. Now, guests located here in the bottom box are those who have not submitted a request to become a volunteer and they're not on the official roster. They can make suggestions, interject their ideas, provide background or input on various discussions that are going on. But in order to become a working group member, you need to at least be a reviewer, which means you would need to do the things listed on the box on the right-hand side. And this is just kind of an overview of the various functions of the different roles that I just went over. So as you can see here, the members have a lot of roles and functions that they have to do, but they can vote at the plenary session, whereas the advisors and reviewers cannot. Otherwise, they do a lot of the same things. And guests, as you can see also here, cannot serve on the working group unless they become a reviewer, which is actually, for those of you who are worried about how difficult that process is to become a reviewer, it's not difficult. Um, it's a pretty fast, easy process. So these are the documents that are managed by our AST subcommittee. Many of you know the M100. We also oversee M2, M7, M11. And then there are a variety of guidelines too listed here, the M45 for fastidious organism tables, M39 and M23. And then on the right-hand side are the revision cycles for these. It can get a little bit confusing, but CLSI lets us know when things are up for revision, and then we'll look at them. Okay, so the last big thing I wanted to discuss is the difference between standing and ad hoc working groups. So there are standing working groups that are listed here. These are the large working groups of the ASD subcommittee. We have 6 of them. The methods development and standardization, which develops methods, testing methods, and assesses them. Methods application and interpretation determines how those test methods can be used. And then we have the QC working group, the texts and tables, which does a huge amount of work incorporating recommendations and making all those little detailed changes in the M100 that are so important. The breakpoint working group sets clinical breakpoints and ECVs, epidemiological cutoff values. And finally, the outreach working group provides educational and informational outreach to stakeholders. So the working groups all review data and make recommendations consistent with what their primary function is. So let's now look at where the ad hoc working groups stand in all of this. So the ad hoc working group is listed here in the light gray boxes on the bottom, and then the standing working groups are in the darker blue color. So the AST subcommittee oversees the standing working groups. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there are working groups that are not really under the standing working groups. M37 antibiogram is one of them. Some of these are too broad to really fit into oversight by one of the standing working groups. So that's why we have those listed on the right-hand side there. So the standing working groups are standing, they're permanent, more or less. The ad hoc working groups are those that have banded together when there's an assignment that's limited in scope or has a limited time frame, and they will disband upon completion of their assignment. So an example, uh, under methods development and standardization, I'm working with the direct blood culture susceptibility ad hoc working group. And after we finish looking at those breakpoints, et cetera, then we'll disband, for example. So you can see here the difference between those. And another thing I'll mention is that the ad hoc working groups will change over time, obviously, because there will be new issues that come up or other issues won't be as important. And so the group may disband. So how can you attend as volunteer for one of these meeting types? So I'm actually going to start with the bottom row, the plenary session and the standing working groups. Those are open to all registrants. The other working groups that aren't under the standing working groups, you do need to contact the working group chair if you wish to contribute to that particular working group and be involved in those discussions. So that's open to the members of that particular respective working group. The ad hoc working groups on the first row here, they're open to members of that specific ad hoc working group. Again, so if you see an ad hoc working group that you're interested in contributing to, contact that chair. And this is our, pardon me, our usual subcommittee meeting schedule. Of course, we're doing some of this virtually now, but we meet twice a year. And decisions at these meetings become final when the actual M100 document is published. So we'll make decisions in January, we'll make decisions in June, but it's not until those decisions are final when that M100 is published that following early winter. We do a lot of work in the standing working groups and the ad hoc working groups in between our meetings. So we're meeting a lot. We're doing a lot of conferencing, looking at data, talking about things, writing up things, the agenda materials. That's the only other thing I wanted to mention is that you get those before the meeting. Usually it's about 4 to 6 weeks before the meeting occurs, so you have time to review the data and the materials before the meeting. So this is the AST subcommittee virtual meeting schedule that we have. You can take a look at all these ad hoc working groups and other working groups. You can see when the standing working groups are meeting and then the plenaries. Now, usually, this is how our on-site meetings usually happen. This is more of a typical schedule of what many of us are more used to. Our working groups on Sunday from 8 to 5 usually meet on a weekend, and there's a lot of overlap between working groups, obviously, a lot of discussions and time overlap, so it's all really exciting. People are running around everywhere trying to go to all these different meetings and learn stuff. It's actually really fun. And I'll also mention here, there's usually a new member reception. And so this is our substitute for that. Okay, so when there's an issue that comes up, like something that needs to be addressed, and I'm just going to say like an interest, let's just say in direct blood culture AST. I'll just say that because I co-chair that group. So when there's an interest in that, it's brought up and discussed, and then an ad hoc working group is formed. The ad hoc working group has a lot of discussions and meetings looking at data, and sometimes a vote of the ad hoc working group members may be taken on an issue. Then the ad hoc working group chairs or co-chairs present to their assigned standing working group. And you're going to see this. You're going to see the standing working groups meetings. You're going to see those of us from ad hocs presenting to them. And the ad hoc working group chairs will present this summary, and then the standing working group will have a preliminary vote. Then the standing working group chairs then present to the AST subcommittee at the plenary session. You're going to see that as well. And there's also a detailed summary of issues that went on in the standing working group, and then a final vote is done votes are done at the plenary session. There are some other working groups that may not go through this process, shown here on the lower left-hand side of the slide, that goes straight on to the AST subcommittee working group. So this is how the AST subcommittee working group works. There's some overlap with the other subcommittees that you'll see, and some differences. And so the next speaker, oh, I'm so sorry. I had one more slide. How can you learn more about the AST subcommittee and ongoing projects? This is really a great website. Please spend some time going to this website. It's just got so much information in it. Visit our materials and minutes from previous meetings. There's a good search capability. You can look at current and past AST subcommittee news updates, PowerPoints from workshops done before. It's a lot of really interesting information. All right, and with that, I'll pass this over to Sean Lockhart to discuss the subcommittee on antifungal susceptibility tests.
Thank you, Audrey. I guess I could just say ditto and kind of be done. Everything she said, just substitute bacteria for mold and yeast, but it's not quite that easy. And if I could get control of the slides, please. Thank you. All right, so I am on the, or I am a right now an advisor to the subcommittee of an antifungal susceptibility tests. We're responsible for setting ECVs and breakpoints for yeasts and filamentous fungi or molds. We've got both kinds of fungi here, yeasts and molds. We review data, we set QC ranges for brand new antifungal agents, and we manage antifungal susceptibility testing documents. We are kind of like the ugly cousin at the party that no one really talks to. Those fungal people were a little weird, smaller group, a little bit more intimate, but actually a lot of fun, and people really, they get into the meetings. We have a lot of good discussions. It's a fun group. Unlike what Janet said, I'm not the chairholder. Dr. Gary Prokop from Cleveland Clinic is the chairholder, and Philip Dufresne from Public Health Quebec is the vice chairholder currently. So we came on the scene much, much later. And, you know, part of the reason is we really only have 10 antifungal drugs in total. Compare that to, you know, the dozens and dozens of antibacterial agents that are out there. And up until about the beginning of the 1990s, we basically had 2. So there wasn't a whole lot of work to be done. Now that is changing dramatically, and it's a really fun time to be in antifungals because we've gone from essentially 10 drugs to now we have either 5 or 6 drugs that are now in phase 2 clinical trials with 4 new classes of drugs. So we had 3 classes going through the last, 40 years, and all of a sudden we have 4 brand new classes of drugs. So it's a really exciting time. Our first document, our main document, M27, kind of the M23 equivalent, yeast broth microdilution, didn't get its first non-preliminary publication until 1997. And that is broth microdilution for yeasts. Shortly after that, we had broth microdilution for molds. Then we have disc diffusion for both yeasts and molds. And then we have our M100 equivalents, and those are M60 and M61 for broth microdilution and disc diffusion for yeasts and for molds, respectively. We have a brand new set of documents that we just developed in 2016 on ECVs. Part of the reason we're doing that is because, mold infections are rare. And for most of our bug drug combinations, there are no breakpoints, and there never will be any breakpoints because we don't have any clinical control trials to use for our data set. So instead, we're working on setting ECVs. And that's been a major focus of emphasis right now, as well as these brand new drugs that are in phase 2 and some even in phase 3 clinical trials. So these are all our documents. I kind of just went through them. M27 and M38 are our major documents, our older documents. The ones that are actively working on are our guidelines, M59, M60, and M61. These are published as needed, but we've been doing them almost on a yearly basis the last few years because we're all of a sudden generating so much data, especially QC data for these brand new antifungals. And so our guidelines have been really, really active the last couple years. They sat around for a very long time, unlike M100, which I swear gets changed not only yearly, it seems like monthly to me, but M100 is constantly changing, and we were lagging, and now stuff is really moving in the antifungal group, and it's fun and it's exciting. Sorry. Okay. We only have two standing working groups. One is the epidemiological cutoff value working group, and I'm the chairholder of that group. And the other is the reporting group, and I believe Audrey's the chair of that one. Those are our two standing working groups. For those, we usually don't meet at the meeting. Most of our meetings take place virtually. The ECV working group, we have 2 or 3 virtual meetings, a couple hours, 2 or 3 times a year. And we have been making a presentation at the Antifungal Subcommittee meeting every year for the past 5 years. So that's a really active group. The reporting group is brand new. I think this was their 2nd year. This will be their 3rd year, this coming meeting, to have this reporting group. And so they've been very active as well. It's an area that we never had before. Unlike bacteria, we didn't have body site restrictions or things that we had determined were intrinsically resistant. And so that's being developed right now, and that's a very active part of one of the working groups that we have going. We do have some ad hoc working groups. We don't have any currently, but as the need arises, we also put together ad hoc working groups, and those are usually together for a year or so. So we have a face-to-face meeting every January. We occasionally have a virtual meeting in June. It's very, very rare for us to have an on-site meeting in June because, we're a smaller group with fewer drugs. But I'd say probably every other year we have at least a virtual meeting in June. We start, we gather data all year long and then submit everything in December for that upcoming January meeting. So we only meet one day. Typically it's Saturday, and our meetings are usually 8 to 5. Some years we end up going 8 to 2. Some years we go all the way 8 to 5. It just depends on what new drugs are there, what's being presented, what ad hoc committees are present that year. And then, we have the educational workshop. I would highly recommend the educational workshop. It's free CME. There are usually really good topics, and there's always a bacteria person, a fungal person, and a vet person. So you get some data sets that you wouldn't necessarily consider. The last one, they did a whole lot of vet stuff, and I just was blown away. I had no idea that those issues even existed. And so they're really fun and fantastic, and I highly recommend the education workshops. And that's it for me. So I think Brian will be presenting this next.
Yes. Thank you, Sean. Do I have control yet? And I can, while I'm working on switching the control over, I will echo the comments of both Audrey and Sean. A lot of this will look the same. Obviously, we're part of CLSI, so we follow the same processes and procedures. So a lot of this will look familiar. There are some differences, obviously, but as far as our mission goes, the mission we have is almost exactly the same as what Audrey presented for the AST subcommittee. Except our focus is on bacteria isolated from animals. And again, there are some issues that are unique to us, but what we try to do is, develop standards that laboratories can use for testing and reporting, make sure we have quality control for those standards, establish new breakpoints, which is, that's an exciting area for us. That's what we do, but we're seeing a lot more. Our breakpoint development has really grown the last few years. And then the last part of it is a lot about how those test results are used. And so we've kind of expanded to include an audience that's the veterinary practitioner in the recent past. So we look the same, and on paper I think we are the same, just a little bit different focus. As was mentioned, I am the chairholder for the VAST subcommittee, and Dr. Diaz Campos, who is a microbiologist at Ohio State as our vice chair. We work under the same rules as far as constituency for our subcommittee goes. We have a balance of industry, government, and the professions, microbiologists, pharmacologists, clinicians, and then folks associated with pharmaceutical companies and contract research organizations are also in our membership. Our timeline, I guess we sit in the middle. So the VAST was actually formed out of the AST. So the initial work was kind of undertaken by AST, and then we branched off and became our own subcommittee starting in 1993. Our original versions of the M100 were the M31 and the M38, and those have been renamed VETO 1 and now VETO 1S, I guess, is our table supplement. We do have some other documents that I'll talk about here in a second because they're all associated with one of our working groups. And like I said, the most recent one, the VETO 9 document, it's the Understanding AST Data in Veterinary Stewardships. That was a really unique document for us with the focus on the practitioner and how they read and interpret laboratory results. So the documents that the VAST manages, we have our two standards, which are, again, that's the VETO 1, which is how to do the testing, and then the VETO 1S, which is our tables, our breakpoint tables. The other guidelines, like I said, they serve various constituencies or needs. Again, VETO 9 was for the veterinary practitioner. We actually have a VETO 3, VETO 4. That's our aquaculture group. So we do have breakpoints and ECVs for some of the fish pathogens that we encounter in veterinary medicine. VETO 2, and I apologize, I don't know the human equivalent, but it's the guidelines for sponsors on how to set QC and breakpoints. And so that's our version of that document. And then we have the VETO 6, which is a document for those pathogens where we don't have good data because they're not as frequently isolated, or maybe they're a fastidious organism that we don't encounter as often in the lab. We have our VETO 6 document. And then we have a VETO 5 document, which started out as an antibiogram in veterinary medicine, but that shift has actually gone back to M39. And I'm happy to say that I was able to help work with Dr. Hindler on that working group to help add a veterinary chapter to the new M39. So our standing working groups, again, all of these are associated with one of our documents. So we have a methods working group, we have an editorial breakpoint tables working group. Obviously, those two working groups overlap. Our subcommittee is actually very small, very intimate, and so most of the people that are active on our committee, they serve on multiple working groups, and those two specifically, there's a lot of overlap in the working group memberships. Breakpoint setting requirements, that's the working group that deals with our VETO 2 document, and so we try to. They're the ones that help move forward on what sponsors need to have to develop a breakpoint. And then we have the aquatic animals working group. They're the ones that put out the VETO 3 and 04 documents. That's a very specialized niche of veterinary medicine. And so that's kind of a unique group of volunteers. And then we also have an education and outreach working group that helps kind of translate this out to our members and really the end users of our documents. Our typical meeting schedule, we typically, in the recent past, we made the decision we would try to do all of ours at one meeting a year, and that was the January meeting. So we always have a January meeting. We're going to miss our face-to-face meeting this year. Like I said, we're a small group, and there's a lot of networking that goes on at that. So, but this one will be conducted virtually. And then January through May, our working groups are active. Any document work that needs to happen occurs. If needed, we have June meetings, and the if needed depends on if we have sponsors that are really wanting a breakpoint set. We do our best to accommodate them and have that meeting. But in the last few years, because our veterinary documents are now publicly available for free. We made the decision that June meeting we would only have as needing. And so again, if we have that meeting, it's kind of business as usual. If not, our working groups are active throughout the year. And then in December, we submit our agenda materials for the upcoming January meeting. I think the rest of it is very similar to the way that the other subcommittees operate. Our typical schedule, so we actually start first. Our meeting starts on Thursday. So I guess I'll work from the bottom up. So that Saturday educational workshop that's listed, that's the same educational workshop that Audrey and Sean both referred to. So we actually meet prior to that educational workshop, and a lot of this is intentional. We do have quite a few of our members that also participate in AST and antifungal. And so we set our meetings early so that after we're done, those volunteer members can stay on and participate in the other subcommittee meetings. So we usually start Thursday with our working groups and then open our plenary session late morning into afternoon and get started. And then the main bulk of our meeting usually happens on a Friday. And so we try to get all of our work done in the one day, as we're day and a half, I guess. And then any follow-up that needs to happen. So the working groups, particularly our Vet 01 and Vet 1S work, or the editorial breakpoint working group, if there's any follow-up work for them, they'll stay and finish that work Friday evening. And I think that's it for me, and I'll pass it back to Janet.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how you can become involved with the subcommittees and the various working groups. And I hope after listening to Audrey and Sean and Brian, you realize there are limited opportunities for you to get involved. And Sean, please, I apologize for misrepresenting your position with the antifungals. Let's see. Okay. So how can you become involved with the working group member? And as we mentioned, most volunteers start at the working group level, but it's possible for you to get involved with a subcommittee as well initially. So, determine your interest in a particular working group. You heard a lot about the various types today. As I mentioned, you could usually start as an ad hoc working group member. And again, too, if you want to participate in any of these capacities, you have to become an official volunteer, as Audrey mentioned, and speak with the subcommittee chairholder, the chairholder of the ad hoc or the standing working group or the outreach working group member. We included our email addresses on the initial slides. So at this point, I don't think there is a list posted on the CLSI website as to who are the chairholders of these various committees and working groups, but I think that's going to happen in the near future. Plan to attend a working group session. Again, too, you can go to Whova and see the schedule, and whichever spur your interest, please listen. You could also go back to the CLSI website and to see what other materials have been presented for the various working groups and subcommittees. I also might want to mention that everybody talked about the educational workshops, and all of the slides from the past 5 years or so from those educational workshops are on the website, and you could access those as well. And there's a lot of information in those educational workshop slides. Feel free when you attend a working group session to make suggestions, to present some data, to offer to work on various projects and so forth. And again, too, as I mentioned, there's unlimited opportunities to work in a variety of different capacities. Okay, so one of the questions comes up: must you be a working group member to attend a working group meeting to raise issues or contribute data? And the answer to that is no, anybody can attend. And this is how you can learn better what working groups or subcommittees might be the best fit for you. So you can raise an issue, you can submit some data that is new or is currently being discussed. And again, you could look at some of the previous information that was presented to see if you have information that can complement what already has been presented. You meet with the working group chair virtually or by email, so they could help better understand what types of information you would like to contribute to that working group. Now, one thing to point out is that all of the materials that are going to be discussed at the working group and the subcommittee and the plenary sessions has to be in the agenda book to be voted upon and to be used to reach a decision to vote. And there are deadlines for submission of the agenda book material. And this is approximately 6 weeks before the January and the June meetings. And you will get notification as to when those deadlines actually are. Okay, so what are some of the benefits about becoming a CLSI volunteer? I have to mention proudly that I have been a CLSI volunteer for nearly 3 decades now. It's been an invaluable experience to me, and I can honestly say that there has been no organization to which I have participated as a volunteer that has been more helpful and more beneficial to my career development than working with CLSI as a volunteer. So here you can learn about the latest developments in all aspects of antimicrobial testing, about new drugs, about what's happening with these new drugs, about how we're developing some of the tests for these new drugs and some of the obstacles that might be encountered. You can learn about new agents and new resistance mechanisms. And most importantly, you can network with leaders in the field. I would have to say that, anybody who has any significant, I shouldn't say anybody, but most who have significant interest in antimicrobial susceptibility do attend these CLSI meetings. And the photo that you're seeing right here is from one of the recent plenary sessions at the human antimicrobial susceptibility testing meeting. And you can see the large number of participants at that meeting. Grow your resume with your involvement. And again, too, this can be tremendously beneficial for your career development. And as other speakers have mentioned, it's a lot of fun. It's obviously going to be more fun attending the live meetings and the virtual meetings, but even during the virtual meetings, we're hoping to have some fun as well. So with that, ways to get involved, register for the meeting, as most of you have done by now. If you have any questions, you can contact CLSI staff members. For the AST and the antifungal, that is Marcy Hasenbrook and Hackenbrack, and her email address is here. The vet, it's Lori Moon, and her email address is here as well. It'd be helpful to review some of the agenda materials that are emailed to you before the meeting. And those materials are being posted to the CLSI website right now for the upcoming virtual meetings. You decide which working groups to attend. Now, this is, can be a little complicated when there's face-to-face meetings because there may be several working groups sessions ongoing at the same time. So you have to obviously make some decisions there. Review the M23, and that is the document for the the breakpoints for human agents. The M60 is a comparable document for antifungals, or the VET 02. So again, too, some of the biggest discussions and the most, I don't want to say heated, but the most exciting discussions evolve around setting breakpoints and QC ranges. And so these documents will give you background information about how those processes occur. Talk to a colleague who has volunteered with the subcommittee for the subcommittee work group. And by all means, Audrey and myself and all the other speakers from today, we're very open to have an email conversation or a phone conversation with you about anything you're interested in, and attend a working group and the plenary sessions. Okay, so with that, you have the opportunity to answer any questions. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat. Oops. And again, too, even before we get to the questions, we really want to thank you for your interest in participating in our session today. Hopefully, we will see you virtually, or even more importantly, in person at upcoming meetings. And obviously, there are many opportunities for you to make contributions to our efforts through the CLSI Subcommittee on Antimicrobial Susceptibility Testing. So are there any questions for any of us, Megan?
There are not.
If anyone does have a question, you can use the raise hand button and we can allow you to say it out loud, or you can type your question in the chat function, which is again at the bottom of the screen. There's a little chat icon that you can click to type your question.
If I may, this is Audrey. I just wanted to echo what Janet had said. It is a fantastic organization, so many opportunities and ways of networking. I have used WOVA or HUVA actually before for another meeting, and you can actually network and send messages back and forth to other attendees. Just wanted people to know that, because of the fact that we can't be face-to-face right now, there's still networking opportunities.
I think there was one, I'm looking at one question in the chat box, and this might best be handled by one of the CLSI staff members, please. Do you see it, Megan or Katie or Marcy?
Hi, this
Yes.
is Marcy. I guess what she's asking is task list of what to do. Oh, is this far as joining the meeting or? Sorry, okay, if you're attending any of the meetings, there will be agenda materials going to be posted in Whova very soon. There will be a meeting agenda and a list of the different meetings at what days they are.
Of what materials to review, I think is what she's asking, Marcy.
Oh, I think it depends on which meetings you want to attend. They're
Yeah.
all separated out by working group. There are the 6 primary working groups, the standing working groups. They each have their own folder. All the materials will be in that folder or will be on the page for that particular meeting in Whova. The plenaries, there are 4 different plenaries. We generally have presentations from each of the working groups and some other presentations. They will be posted at a later date because they generally won't have those ready until right before the plenary, but they will be added to the plenary page once those are available. Does that answer the question?
Hi, Marcy, this is Lori Moon. If I can add to that, I think Juliet is a new reviewer on the VAST subcommittee, and the VAST meeting materials will be posted similarly to the AST, but they're not going to be out and posted until during the week of January 18th. So that'll be sometime later next week.
I'll just add a quick comment. I think if you are brand new to all of this, I think the M23, thank you, Janet, that's the one I was trying to think of. M23 and Veto 2 and M60 documents are a great place to start to review, to see kind of what these committees are about. But I always encourage first-time people to just kind of sit and listen and figure out what's going on. Just because there is a lot that will be going on, at least I'll speak for my subcommittee. In the upcoming meeting, we're going to have breakpoint presentations. We're going to have document comment reviews. There'll be lots of different votes. I always encourage people just to kind of sit and listen and watch, find somebody or connect with somebody who's done it for a while to ask questions of, and then settle yourself in. You'll find out which working groups kind of fit your needs and interests and go from there.
I see there's another question, and this is from someone that I previously applied to a standard committee anaerobes and was not chosen as a member. Is that different from suggestion to contact the subgroup chair to be a working group member? Well, even if you're not a working group member, you can still contribute to that working group. And so, you know, there's certain individuals that are appointed to that working group, but there's a lot of other people to contribute to the processes and, you know, what's being accomplished by that working group without being an actual appointed volunteer working group member. So that shouldn't deter you from going to those meetings and, you know, not participating in the working groups just because you can participate, even if you're not, because there's a limited number of actual working group members for each of these different working groups.
Hi, this is Marcy. I think
yeah.
she is just talking about there. Recently, a call for volunteers went out for M56, which is the anaerobe identification document development committee, which is different from the AST anaerobe working group. So you can certainly get involved with the anaerobe AST working group, even if you didn't get selected for that document development committee.
One other thing is too, as others have mentioned, is that if you don't have time to attend a lot of the working group sessions, you know, the plenary sessions where it all comes together. So you can see all of the issues that have been discussed by the various working groups throughout the course of the meeting. So that would be a good place to get, you know, a good overview of the types of issues that are being currently discussed.
Yeah, just to clarify, those document development committee groups are for certain documents, and they don't, since they don't fall within these 3 particular subcommittees, they have slightly different processes. But Francis, yes, if you're interested, for instance, in like the anaerobe working group of the AST subcommittee, you could contact the chair of that group and see if there's an opening right then, and if there isn't, you could still attend and contribute data or listen. We've all been there. We've submitted and not been invited for different things, so it's okay.
Oh, I see a question
there's-
from Kia.
Yep.
Yeah. Once you serve on a subcommittee for 4 years, you just become a member. Well, generally, all volunteers appointed to the subcommittee are appointed for 1 year for up to 4 years. There is an exception for AST. We sometimes extend people because they have particular expertise. Now, once you've had a role, once you've been a member for 4 years or an advisor for 4 years, generally we will rotate you. Reviewers can stay on as long as they want. There is no end date for reviewers unless you ask to be removed. If you're a guest, which means you're not a member or an advisor or a reviewer on the subcommittee roster, it means that you can continue to visit the meetings. You can also apply to become one of those roles on the subcommittee.
I think we could say too, if for those individuals that are, honestly interested, passionate about the topic and honestly interested in contributing to it to help develop, to do a lot of the work, that it's unlikely you'd be turned away.
Yes, sometimes it depends on, for those document development committees, the numbers of volunteers that end up coming in, and we try to choose, CLSI tries to choose among the different constituencies, so we have to kind of balance it too that way. There are a lot of different things that fall into these decisions.
That looks like all of the questions we have today. I just wanted to jump in and note that this will be recorded and sent to anyone who registered for the new member or new attendee session. So if you attended this, you'll get this as a recording if you want to follow back up. And that's everything from the CLSI side.
Yeah, reach out to us. We would love to talk with you about our experiences and any suggestions.
And we're more than open to new volunteers.
Yes.
Please understand that. There's always opportunities.
Thank you all for presenting today, and we will look forward to the future AST meetings later this month and next month.
And hope to see you virtually.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.